everyone. Um, yes, so today I'm just gonna go through the router app as well as the source code and the idea behind as I presented previously and was requested to demo the project. Yeah, so basically the router app is a simple SwiftUI app compatible with iOS 16 and above. But basically all the functionality are really compatible with any Swift version from Swift 1.1 point 0, 1.0, and yeah, it's best to check it out on an iOS simulator as we will do, or on a Mac, because it's easy with the UI to check everything out. So yeah, as you can see, we basically have a content view, the rotor view, which is basically all our code will go in the rotor view. The content view is just a wrapper for our rotor view. We have a couple of controls, and um, we'll have some reusable view. So let's go back first. Let's run the project and go to our simulator, and from there, yep, here we are. And from here we can see that we have a simple UI composed with this the shape here. We have our controls here, and as well as our reset button, basically just to change or reset everything that might have been changed. So let's go on and check the project. So as I said earlier, we have our content view containing the rotor view. So let's go from the smallest component, which is the control view. If I try to run the control view here, basically you'll see that it's just a bunch of components. We have different segmented picker, we have a slider, and so on, with different values as well. Just I call them labeled slider in the project. You can see it's basically just a function that returns some kind of view, you know, and I'm just basically doing just a reusable view for easy maintenance, let's say. And then we have our rotor view, which now puts all those things together, mixing our UI together. So here we basically have four views here grouped in a grid layout. Basically the view 1, 2, 3, and so on. And I put different color for easy differentiation, but together they kind of look like one single element, so they form a grid layout per se. And we have our control view down there, as well as our the disable frame here. We'll see it in action, but it basically just disable the small frame or border that we are seeing here, the gray border, so that it just helps us to visually see where the view frame is located. And the reset, as I said earlier, is just to reset everything together, all the values. So in terms of model, as I said, like the control view is bind to a specific data model, which is called rotor. And here I pretty much have all the values that we're gonna be needed: the view height, weight, the view width, the angles, axis, and so on. All these property we will need, as well as the axis, because we, as I said, it's a rotor which rotate in 3 dimensions. So we're gonna need the 3 axis, which is the 3-dimensional point, which is a simple struct with 3 main properties, as well as the anchor, which is basically like where the center of the let's say of the rotation, basically where the view is anchored when we are doing all those let's say manipulation or translation of the view, let's say. So let's go to our UI, and first of all we are presented with a simple UI I already explained earlier. So here we can just play with different properties like the view width or the view height, for example, and see how everything works in real time, which was basically one of my main reasons to build this project. was for me to learn how these different properties worked together to create a kind of animation or transition and understand that all together in SwiftUI. So it was a way for me to explore and learn that the functionality and how these things come together to animate or to to transition from one state to another. As you can see here, we are smoothly animating the width. And we can do that for the height, and all everything works, beautifully together. So if I try to, for example, change certain values, you would not see them in effect because there is no like maybe specific, degree. For example, if we try to, let's say, change the axis, you see. So that means if I'm applying the degree here, I gotta specify which axis, for example. But if the axis was 0, you wouldn't see. You see, it's reset to the default. But when I put axis 1, so the axis is the horizontal, like axis that you would think like, okay, let's say here is our axis. It's like this, like horizontally. And now when we do 1, and we are going, you see, the view is going like behind, kind of flipping, kind of flipping behind, you see. And the reason we have our frame here, that I can disable or enable, it's for me to show you that actually the frame is still there. It's just we are applying some properties to the view itself, but its frame is still, exactly there. So it's not the frame moving, but mostly the view itself moving, but its position is there. That's why if we click reset, everything is set back together because the frame was there. Like what properties apply is like if we change the width, you can see that the border also is changing. So those property actually affect the frame of the view, like you can see. But if we are rotating, for example, let's rotate, y axis, you see. So we are rotating, flipping the view in a y-axis, you see. And if we were doing this, it would be the opposite. So you kind of get, by playing with this property, you kind of get how these things come together. And if you try the two, boom. So you have x and y, and you can see how things work. Check, look how beautiful this is, right? And if you play with perspective now, check what perspective does. Basically, let's reset this and see. You see, nothing happens when you change the perspective. But if there is a degree applied to it and you're changing to change the perspective, so it's like how, I don't know, like how are you looking, which perspective are you looking this from, you see. So if you're looking from a certain perspective, that's how the view would look like, you see. So this is kind of interesting because the frame is there, but the view is attached on the left, right side and the bottom side, but the other side are kind of translated. That's the term I normally use to show that the view is like those properties that we are using, the axis x and y, and are applying to the view directly, but the view frame doesn't change. So if we use now the anchor property, right, you see here we are playing with the anchor properties, like at which point, let me maybe give a, let's reset everything. Let's apply, for example, a 45 or some kind of degree on the y-axis, right, or on the two axis. Let's just do this, and we are applying, maybe let's apply the vertical axis like this, right? You see how the view is rotated. And now we try to apply, for example, an anchor. You see, this is now we're putting, for example, you can observe that here we have the x of the view, and when you do the anchor to 0, like the whole rotation will apply, but it won't move away from the from the origin, let's say the x origin of the view, you see. So it's like a total flip we are doing, which is amazing, by the way. But it doesn't move away from the x. And the more we now increase, you kind of see how the anchor is getting away from the origin x here. So which is kind of interesting, and that same thing applies to the y, I mean axis. You can see, so a good example is if we try to change everything here. We have the view itself, we rotate it in a y axis, and we try now to apply. You see, if it's 0, it's basically at the top here, as you can see. So it's amazing to see that it literally at the top, you see here, right here. And the more we go, that anchor is actually, going down. So yeah, it's just a way for me, it was a way for me to actually kind of play with this property and trying to understand, oh, okay, so if I rotate this to 60-degree, you see, with on the y-axis, and change these properties. And the good thing is, after you get all these properties, you can now understand and go back in your code and probably just apply those properties. Because when I'm using the 3D effect here, sometimes when you're playing around you don't understand, but here you can play with different values, and when you get the correct, maybe uh, rotation, 3D rotation that you are expecting or that you want, you can literally just copy these values and apply it in a different context, right? So about the z axis now, which we haven't talked about, let's reset again our view. I kind of make it bigger for us to easily see what's going on. So let's say you were to rotate. I like to play with like this, and you're wondering why is this not moving. If you understood my explanation, is like you are trying to apply a degree, but there is no specific axis, like all of them are 0. So are we applying that, you know on x axis, on y axis, or are we applying that on x, y, or z? Which one are we applying to? So most of the time you'd see in 3D rotation, people try to play a lot with the third axis, which is z. And now you see they're doing some things like this, like where you see this, and maybe they will do one like this, and now you can see it like this. You see, so how beautiful is this? And maybe when they are here, they could set this back, change this back, change the perspective, and play with this, all this smooth animation together, and that's how it plays together. So it's just, this basically project tends to explain how animation can, how this property can be animated together, and like mostly how each property animates based on different factors. Because if you're on 0, like negative x-axis, and you try to rotate, it's a bit different from when you're on a positive axis and try to rotate, you see. So it's the let's say the movement or the direction is kind of, uh let's say, not similar. The direction is different. One is from, yeah, top to bottom, the other one is from bottom to top, or something like that when you reduce. So you see, it depends on what you need and what you're trying to animate, basically. And the perspective, by the way, the perspective is, as I was already explained, is like kind of from which perspective you are looking. So a good example is, if this view was clipped, like this view was clipped, you wouldn't see all these, um, let's say, overflow here, or this view overflow. So you would see the view clipped, because if the view was clipped like this grid layout, you wouldn't see all this part. So in certain animation, you might want your view to look normal, but as it goes, maybe you want just this particular space to be visible, and you could apply a perspective. So you see, and the more degrees, you know, now you see, if we are on, I think, 180, everything looks great. But things are flipped. You see, the view 1 is here, view 2 is 2, and now everything is just different because the view is flipped. But we're on 180 degrees, so it's flipped bottom up, but on a next axis. So if you go here, you see what happened. If you go on 0, you get everything good. If you go on this, now the view is flipped. So this one looks like this one on one perspective, right? So it's kind of interesting to think about how this all come together, basically. And to just play around with this view. I think you can learn more than you know than just playing around with the properties. So yeah, just a kind of toy projects for people interested in learning 3D effects in SwiftUI. And there's a lot more. It's not perfect. You can see, as I think, when you move from, for example, you see here, like sometimes when you move from one, let's apply a Z rotation. When you move from, you see, like certain animation are not flawless. So yeah, the project is not perfect. And as well, as when you understand why it's not, why it's doing this, you would also, this actually kind of could be kind of an assignment actually, because what happens is, like, these two are the same, but why is it animating? It's because it's not going from -1 to 1 with an animation. So that animation means there is a duration. And the duration to animate from -1 to 1 causes the view to first go here and then here. But you don't see that because we kind of see it. It's kind of growing and getting back. So that's how you can understand the animation as well in SwiftUI. Because when you try to animate something for a duration like 3 seconds, it kind of gets where it is and where it's going, origin, destination, and try to apply that animation if it can, of course, because some properties are not animatable. And if it's kind of doesn't make sense, that's when it looks like this. So yeah, just a hint. And if you disable this, now you can see that the frame is not there. So yeah, hopefully you get to understand what is going on. Let's get here. Boom. Nice. You get to understand what this project is about. And yeah, if you have questions or if you have improvements, I'll link the repo in the description of the video. And if you have question, yeah, reach out then.